Hello, welcome to Game Over Gerkinman. I'm Gerkinman, and this is, of course, Kameo Elements of Power. This is episode 3, and today we're going to go and get another elemental spirit, or power, or whatever. I've already forgotten what they're called. I've already stopped caring. Oh, the way she delivers that line is awful. Anyway. This is pretty much the end of the tutorial period of the game. Thankfully, it gets a little bit less exposition-y. Is that a word? Exposition-y? It gets a little bit less like that after this part of the game. Thank God. Or at least from what I've played so far, it starts to downplay it a bit. Because these cutscenes really do just drag it out horribly. So I'm glad they start to pop up less frequently. There's a lot of recycling too. Like, they recycle this like 6 or 7 times, which is too many. Actually, these cutscenes are dreadful. I don't know why they went with this technique. Still, like, it just boggles my mind that they thought that doing a slideshow like this would be the best way to go. But at least we get a bit of an idea of, from that mouth, what our next big villain's gonna be. Although he's another 2 episodes away. It's a little bit of foreshadowing there. It gives you a little bit of a taste without telling you exactly what you're going to be up against. But they refer to it as a demon, which it really isn't when you get up to it, which is kind of odd. Oh, this cutscene goes forever. Has it really been like almost 2 minutes? They could have summed this up in like 20 seconds. Just keeps going. Thank God it is over. So we're actually going to get to go down into the... I guess it's kind of like an overworld. It's not really quite an overworld, but it's kind of like an overworld, if that makes sense. It probably doesn't. It makes sense in my head. A place called the Badlands, which is basically this game's version of Hyrule Field. It's how you access all the different parts of the game. It's a pretty common technique used in most games now, although this one definitely has a much more kind of like Ocarina of Time. It's very modular. It's just like this big one area, and then from there you can branch off to, you know, whatever other different areas you feel like heading to. So the game also does this annoying thing. The transition animations won't work if you're too close to things. And now I can understand that they've done that so that if you transform while you're next to that fence, you're not going to you're not going to get stuck in the fence's geometry. But they could have also just had like a little trigger in there, so if you hit the button when you're too close to something, as the transformation happens, the character gets pushed back. I don't know why that wasn't implemented. Maybe it was too hard, or maybe they just thought it was easy just to not let them transform at all. I don't know, but it's an interesting little thing that could have been there to streamline things a little bit. That limp sync though. I just noticed there's like beetles walking around on the floor for some reason. While there's a guy sweeping. I think he's sweeping. He's doing something like that. But here we go. We're going to make our way down to the overworld. Or the Badlands, as they call them. This is where the... it showed off, when it was released at least, this is when it showed off the power of the Xbox 360 a little better. I can't remember if this character is very consequential or not to the game. I get the feeling he might not be. But here we go. So this is like some other little pot point shrines to keep the magical barrier around the enchanted island, forest, planet. Enchanted Kingdom, sorry. This voice acting is unbelievable. I guess like Rare was never really known for its voice acting. I almost wish that this went down the Banjo-Kazooie route and just had people going and speaking in just gibberish language, because this is really bad. I think like Conker got away with the voice acting because it was the writing was genuinely funny and the characters were genuinely funny and the voices suited them. But in this, it just feels like they got their programmers in to fill in the roles. This is where the scope of the Xbox 360 really came into play. So there you go, like, there's no way that this could have been done on the GameCube or the original Xbox, having this many characters on screen at once. Even after this, the only other game I could think of that came out that had this number of, like, enemies on screen at once was, like, Dead Rising 1 and 2. They seem to be the only games that attempted to do anything like that. And, you know, like, even though they're all obviously quite low polygon, they've all got basically one of 2 or 3 different animation cycles. It's still quite impressive even now seeing that many characters on screen, not because it looks great, because it doesn't look particularly great, but because even after this you never really saw the systems pushed in that sort of direction where the power of those systems was used more so for a sheer volume of animated characters so much as pure graphical fidelity. So it is kind of interesting that despite these earlier games like Dead Rising and this having these massive armies and stuff, it was never really something that you saw in later games. Everything seemed to get stripped back as time went on. And yes, much like Epona with these apples, this horse gets tired if you ride him too fast for too long. He gets a little bored. It is kind of annoying though, into like normally when you'd ride Epona somewhere where you weren't supposed to take him, he would just like put on his brakes, I guess is that what you would describe him as? Whereas this horse just starts riding in the opposite direction, which is really stupid. But here we go, we're making our way into our first real like stage. I'm gonna call it a stage. First real level. And this is who we're going to go save. We're gonna go save Rubble. So this is our first new sprite. So of course last episode we got Pummleweed, who we had in the opening, but this is our first proper new character, which is a good thing to have. This actually reminds me a lot of Fable, which I guess makes sense since they're both made in England. But Fable 2's visuals kind of remind me of this too. There's a certain look to it. I mean, like, this has that classic plasticky Rare look, which Rare had for a long time. Actually, that character, well, Pummleweed's face is pretty messed up. Like, the designs of these plant people, I think they're actually called creepers, which is kind of funny, having these things which have the same name as the creepers in Minecraft. I had to look into it, but they even share some design elements, and I thought that was kind of interesting. But in this particular area, at least, definitely feels like something that could be in a Fable game. Actually, Fable 2 and 3 is something I'm interested in playing through for this channel as well. I've never played through Fable 3, but I played through Fable 2 quite a few times, and it's quite a fun, short RPG. But I'll take that as it comes later on. But this is where Kameo's flyability comes in handy for getting around like bigger environments like that. It actually feels quite good flying around like that, and it's a very quick and effective way of doing things. But it's here that you really start to notice the weakness in the puzzle design, which largely revolves around select a character, use that one technique, and then that's all they're good for, basically. It's a shame that they introduced the combination sort of puzzles like in that early part of the game where you're storming the castle, and then the game kind of strips it all back and takes everything back to its very, very, very basic level, which is what you see here, where you're simply using one thing at a time. It seems kind of weird that they would introduce these more complex puzzles at the beginning and then strip the game back. And that's why, like in the first episode, I said that I felt like there was a good chance that they added that bit in later on in the game's development. You can see there's like a little health counter above the enemies too. That's something I had to brought up. So that's something that is kind of interesting. The game doesn't base itself around enemies take X amount of hits. It's definitely each character's attacks do different amounts of damage. So I guess that gives it like a degree of RPG-ness, although not a whole lot. It does give it a tiny bit more depth though, I suppose. These bats are a nice little thing too. It seems, well, they're nice and they're dumb. I think following these bats would make more sense if the world was more open. I mean, if you were really dumb, you could fall out of there and you'd end up back where you started at the beginning of the level, but The idea of having those bats to kind of lead you down a path without saying specifically, hey, this is where you need to go. That I like, but then there's the fact that these bats are basically leading you down a linear path where there's nowhere to get lost. That makes it kind of silly. And then they just vanish here. Although I do like this little mushroom cavern place. I think it's a cute little environment. The music here is very reminiscent of the Crystal Caves in Donkey Kong 64, actually. Which reminds me, I didn't actually look up who composed this yet. I really need to do that. I have a very simple puzzle. Hit that thing into the fence. Actually, I get the feeling that those creeper creatures are supposed to be like a reference to the Triffids. From the Day of the Triffids, for those of you who are unfamiliar through somehow. Maybe because you're young. If you're young and you haven't heard of Day of the Triffids, then that's unfortunate. It's a good book, well worth reading. Anyway, this is where we go fight the Shadow Troll to get Rubble. Rubble's one of my favourite of the powers. So I'm kind of glad that you get him early on. He's very interesting to use, which I'll get into the next episode, where we'll be using him quite heavily. And now you can see me sucking at this boss fight here with the Shadow Troll. I keep trying to do what I did in the original boss fight, where I was just ran up to the guy and kicked him. But for some reason, in this fight, I just couldn't get it to work. And then I realized I should just throw these light beams at the guy. I am a dumb idiot face sometimes. Though now you get 2 skeletons at once instead of just 1. So that's something at least. It's also worth noting you can't use the power-up creatures in here. You can't use your elements to transform. You have to fight these characters as Kameo, which is kind of... I don't know, I guess they figure that Kameo doesn't really get a lot of use throughout the game in terms of like fighting as her specifically, so I guess that's why they limit you to using her in this part, which I'm doing horribly at. But it would have been more fun fighting these enemies as the creatures, I think, definitely. But like, once again, I can understand why they didn't go down that route. Alright, there's the guy there. The way the vision does invert like that is actually kind of cool. I do like that. But it's just... once you work out the knack to these battles, which I did eventually, don't worry. They're very, very straightforward and super simple. I just constantly trying to kick this guy instead of throwing the light at him, which is a stupid mistake. I also quite like when you absorb these guys, the way you can kind of see their skeleton over the top of Kameo. I think that's a pretty cool touch. It's a very cool visual. The game's got some, yeah, that sums up this game pretty well actually. It's got some really neat ideas and they just weren't pushed as far as they could have been, either because the game's development cycle was dragged out so long over so many different platforms. I mean, the game went through 3 different platforms before it was finally released. Or maybe it was just because it was just like one of the last games of this particular genre, which, you know, outside of The Legend of Zelda, I mean, you've got what, Dark Souls? Oh cool, there's a snowmobile outside, that's what that loud noise is. We had a surprise blizzard last night, so I do apologize for that loud noise. There's not a whole lot I can do about that, unfortunately. Just enjoy the sweet, sweet sounds of grumbling engines. But Rubble is definitely a very cool character. I like this guy a lot. Although as a baby, he looks kind of like a retarded version of the Rockbiter from the Neverending Story. His transform state's pretty cool. And this is where we're going to be leaving you on this episode. So thanks for joining me. Sorry once again, sorry for the noise. Not a whole lot I can do about that until springtime comes. But I hope you had a great day, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for the next episode, which will be a little bit of a longer one than this, but still not too crazy long. So I hope you'll join me for that, and I hope you have a great day.